Child abuse or child maltreatment is physical, sexual, or psychological maltreatment or neglect of a child or children, especially by a parent or the caregiver.
Of course, some children are exposed to extreme abuse, either in the conditions at home or in the conditions at school or in the conditions of other public places that they need to visit.
Child abuse is an offense under several sections of Chapter 21 of Nigeria Criminal Code. According to UNICEF, 6 out of 10 children in Nigeria experience emotional, physical, or sexual abuse before the age of 18, with half experiencing physical violence.
The Violence Against Children Survey, which was conducted by the National Demographic Health Survey, which was led by the MBS, it showed a high prevalence of children who are abused sexually, emotionally, physically in the homes. And sometimes children are beaten. It's a language that many parents and guardians apply now. Instead of talking to a child, they beat the child to make the point, and the child has no defense, is totally defenseless. And within the home, there is sexual abuse, surprisingly, especially maybe against children who are already engaged in labor at a very early age, children who need to be house helps in order to survive, in order to get food, in order to have a living. They are house helps, and it's very common to hear cases of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse.
When a child experiences physical or emotional abuse, the wounds run skin deep. Kids who suffer repeated trauma feel lonely, scared, worthless, and unloved, which is exactly the opposite of how children should feel.
The concept of child rights actually it rests on 4 cardinal rights for the child: right to survival, right to development, right to participation, and right to protection. Indeed, it begins from maternal care when the mother is pregnant, and up to the point where a child is delivered, to have immunization, to have access to child-friendly foods is what we talk about survival. To have access to child-friendly health, the health system, that's what we talk about child survival. If we talk about development, is the child's right to education, the child's right to discussions, to be part of progressive engagements, to be part of educative engagements and educative associations, like holding debates and things that will make the child to develop mentally. The child rights to participation is for a child's views to be entertained, in the course of maybe determining a matter or taking a family decision. For a child's right to be also taken into consideration. That's the right to participation, and for the child to be involved in public issues, to have a knowledge of public issues like we have in the Children's Parliament. And then the most important and relevant here is the child's right to protection. When the entire system is tuned towards protection of a child, when it is child-friendly, when it's child-cognizant, then we talk about child protection. All mechanisms, all strategies, everything put in place to make sure that the child is not exposed to danger, to harm, to abuse. That's what we talk about, child protection. So invariably when we talk about abuse, it means all of that or a substantial part of it has collapsed. The system does not take care of the child. Maybe a child does not have a home, maybe a child does not have a school, maybe a child does not have clothing. It's living below the dignity of a human being, especially considering that children are already vulnerable, and then for them to be without some basic things of life is child abuse. And abuse can destroy a child, permanently, especially mental, psychological abuse. With words, you can destroy a child permanently. Physically, in the case of sexual violence, when you defile a child who is under 13, it affects the child even physically, the reproductive system is affected for good. That's when we hear of cases of VVF and all of that. And then even emotionally, and the child will feel a sense of worthlessness, a sense of inferiority, when they are exposed to these acts of abuse.
Abused children often become broken, hollow, and bitter, with mental consequences that last long after the physical wounds have healed. Immaturity, unrealistic expectations, emotional problems, economic crisis, lacking of parenting knowledge, difficulty in relationships, depression, and other mental health problems are factors that could cause some people to have difficulty meeting the demands of parenthood, leading them to become abusive when they reach a breaking point or don't know what else to do.
The Human Rights Commission here, we have received complaints of people who raped their children. Countless times we have treated complaints like that.
The two main causes of child abuse are domestic violence and substance abuse. Children who live in households where violence is present usually end up becoming victims themselves. Substance abuse is another leading cause of child abuse. Drugs or alcohol attribute to 70% of cases of child maltreatment, meaning physical abuse or neglect. Kids under 5 are the most susceptible to abuse or neglect by a substance abusing parent and represents the fastest growing population of foster children.
The use of drugs could be a very strong factor, driving parents and guardians to do those kind of dastardly acts. Or sometimes it's just the fact that the child is under your care gives you a sort of domination, and then you take out, such harsh measures. And this question now takes us to the issue of response. What kind of response we have in place, in Nigeria here. Ordinarily, a child who is raped by his father or her father, the first ought to be removed from that home in the first place. That's the first thing that ought to be done. Or a child who is whipped, some parents whip their children until they draw blood. Such children ought to be removed from that place in the first place.
The most obvious effect of child abuse is physical injury to the child. Physical injuries can be minor, such as bruises, or severe, such as broken bones or even death. But the pain and suffering leaves more deeper emotional scars. Sometimes, abuse can lead to lasting or recurring health problems, such as shaken baby syndrome or impaired brain development. Abused babies and toddlers are especially vulnerable to injuries to important regions of the brain that are still developing, causing long-term problems with cognitive, language, and academic abilities. Adults who experience abuse or neglect during childhood are more likely to suffer from physical ailments such as arthritis, asthma, bronchitis, high blood pressure, and ulcers. Kids who get abused often feel isolated, fearful, and untrusting, and these immediate emotional effects can transform into lifelong consequences, including low self-esteem, depression, and relationship difficulties. About 80% of young adults who were abused as children met the diagnostic criteria for at least one psychiatric disorder at age 21, including depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicide. Other psychological conditions associated with abuse are panic disorder, dissociative disorder, attention deficit, hyperactive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and reactive attachment disorder. Many kids who are abused score lower than average on tests of cognitive ability, language development, and academic achievement. Abused and neglected kids are 25% more likely to experience problems such as delinquency, teens pregnancy, and teen drug use, and 11 times more likely to be arrested for criminal behavior as a juvenile. About 66% of people in drug treatment programs report being abused as children, and over 30% of abused and neglected kids eventually victimize their own children.
When you tell a child that you are nothing, you are going to be nothing, it goes a very long way and it can actually destroy that child forever.
Child abuse is never okay, irrespective of the reason. Some abuse children because of their desire to feel powerful. Some do because they themselves experienced abuse as children. Others because they don't understand that children have a right to feel safe, while many others think it's okay or appropriate to lord over the children. To deal with child abuse and its effects, talk to someone you trust about it. This could be a friend or a family member. It could also be a police officer, a doctor, counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, trusted teacher, other family member, or health worker.
What matters the most now is for the child to be able to speak out. In the first place, children need to know their human rights. That's the first thing that children need to know. And thankfully, children learn so fast. So they only need to be taught what their human rights are. One, that's why, like in the Human Rights Commission, we encourage and we have gone ahead to set up some human rights clubs in some schools. It's a huge project which we intend to replicate in every school in the country. That will raise knowledge on human rights for children and also teach them a culture of reportage so that they're able to report and confide in someone. You've given the list, maybe confide in their teacher or their mother or their sibling or their pastor. There ought to be someone they confide in, and then that person feeds in the information they have into the system. We have a one-stop center. The one-stop center concept is very popular, in responding to issues of domestic violence, especially as they affect women and children. A very important component of a one-stop center is the psychologist. The psychologist will talk to a child victim and rebuild that confidence. It works. It really works all the time. Rebuild that confidence in that child, and remove that stigma.
Remember that it's not your fault. If you look at kids who are the same age as you were when it happened, you can understand how defenseless you were at the time. Learn about child abuse and its effects. Talk to other people who have experienced child abuse. Support groups for child abuse victims are a good place to meet other survivors who know how you feel. You don't have to deal with this on your own.
It is very okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. There's going to be nothing wrong with you as a result of this act. You will have a very normal life. Hello friends, my name is Barrister Aver Gavar. I'm the Director of Women, Children and Other Vulnerable Groups in the National Human Rights Commission of Nigeria. I encourage you to tune into PTV and know more about the rights of a child. Continue to watch PTV for more enlightenment. Thank you.